Welcome back to Leadership Blueprints, everybody. I have a repeat guest for us today, somebody who I enjoy talking with so much. She always kind of, I'll say, you illuminate uh, the world of infrastructure for me and for us. The last time we spoke, she was getting ready to run 7 marathons on 7 continents over 7 days. And now she is fresh off, I think within the last 45 days, fresh off of swimming 30 miles around Manhattan. Welcome back to the show, Jill Jamieson. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, BJ. I'm glad to be back.
Thanks for joining us. I'm excited to dig into the professional, but before we go there, I want to talk about these. I was reading the book, The Comfort Crisis, on the beach over the summer, and I thought about you because it was all about how we have become so comfortable as a species, especially here in America, where we many of us are I think spoiled with comfort at our fingertips. We're not forced to do uncomfortable things, and this was about a guy that went out into the Alaskan, very rural Alaska for a hunt and kind of his reconnection with himself from doing it. Um, and I think right after I was reading it, I saw you getting ready to do this swim. So I'm very intrigued with the meaning behind the swim and the uh, the mindset at each mile marker.
Yeah, no, I mean it's crazy, but I love to get outside of my comfort zone, right? I think you find growth when you are outside of your comfort zone. So I always say, if I don't stretch myself, I never know how far I can reach. And all of these things, whether it was a world marathon challenge, which I don't know if we spoke since then, but I actually had a stomach flu the whole time. So I was like, I couldn't keep down food or water. We're running 7 marathons on 7 days and 7 continents, and I literally could not take nourishment. And there were moments where I was like, maybe for my health and safety, I should just like quit. But like the mind and the body are amazing, right? And what I learned about myself and my ability to persevere was just, like, it was unbelievable. And also just looking around me at the other people running, like there was a stage 4 cancer survivor in a wheelchair. And in Antarctica, his wheels wouldn't go forward or backwards. They were frozen. And I was like, can I help you? And he's like, no, but go, Jill. And I'm like, how are you this and so you just learn, right? So you're constantly, if you expose yourself to sort of uncomfortable situations, it's almost a renaissance. You're reincarnated at the end of it, right? So who I was when I started is not who I am when I
Mm,
finish, and it's a really fascinating process for me. um, and recently so what happened is I was running so much as I broke my hip. It's going to happen when you get older, right? And so I jumped in the pool, and I had not been in the pool, to be honest with you, since I was a kid. Like, I was a swimmer up until like 8 or 9 years old, and then
okay.
other sports took over, and I just kind of stopped altogether with swimming. Got back in the pool, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot how much I love to swim. And so I started swimming, did some triathlons. I was like, this is kind of fun. And of course, I keep inching up. And I'm like, all right, last year I swam from Asia to Europe and back. It's like 10 miles, but it was like, why not do it, right? And so this year, a friend of mine, he's like, Jill, we should try to swim around Manhattan. It's one of the triple crown of open water swimming. The three
Okay.
are English Channel, Catalina Island Channel, and then the 20 bridges around Manhattan. 20 bridges is the longest. It's about 28.5 miles. I like to round up to 30 because it felt like 30. Um, and so he encourages me to sign up. I'm like, yeah, we'll train together. This will be great. Of course, he inevitably drops out, right? And so I'm like, I'm stuck on my own with this one, and it's a solo swim anyway, right? And I do it to raise money and awareness for Alzheimer's. So once I commit to it, I'm in, right? I'm going to
Yep.
do it whether I'm going to or not, and complete it or not. Every doubt in the world, BJ, was in my head. I'm like, I don't know if I can swim for 10 hours. I don't know if I can handle the water. I don't know, like all kinds of things were going on. I didn't know how to feed in the water. Like, I had to learn how to roll over on my back and drink as I was swimming,
Yeah.
all of those things. And so part of me, like a couple of months before, I didn't have time to train because of work and other things, but I was doing the best I could. I was like, maybe I should just drop out and like do it next year. And then I was like, what are you doing? This is not me. I have no fear of failure. So that's what I've learned. That's the one lesson that I've learned as I get older is to let go of fear of failure. Give it a shot. What do you have to lose, right? Figure out. You can never fail by trying because there are always lessons that you learn, right? So even if complete washout, even if I jumped in the water and been like, ew, this is disgusting, I need to get
Yeah.
out, I would have learned a lesson. So anyway, I did jump in the water, started swimming. It was a really windy day. We had 30-mile-an-hour gusts, which were great when they were pushing me up the East River.
Yeah.
Not so great coming down the Hudson, where I had 8 to 10 foot swells and like white caps, and I threw up in the water because I
Oh my
was.
gosh.
Um, but I'll be honest with you, because the only objective I had when I started was let's just finish this thing and let's be happy the whole way. You know, you have no music, you can't even wear a watch. I don't know what is going on around me. I'm just like swimming. Every 30 minutes, I roll over on my back, I drink some high carb like waters and stuff, and then roll back. Um, I smiled the whole way. I had like songs in my head that I was singing. It was a little gross, I'll be honest with you, in the Hudson River, because the current was against me and they pushed me off to the side. So there was less current against me, but it's where all the sort of the trash and stuff is. But once I got to the mighty Hudson, I mean, I felt, I can't explain it, but it was very zen, but I felt like my ancestors, they all used to live up and down the Hudson Valley, right? Like they emigrated here and they came to the Hudson Valley. I just felt everybody with me. I was swimming. It was beautiful. The sun set as I was swimming. So we started at noon. I finished at 10 p.m. Did some night swimming. First time ever doing night swimming. So I had to figure out how to put a lamp on my head. Um, it was gorgeous seeing Manhattan light up, and it was the most spectacular experience. And like when I got out of the water, got back on the boat, I can't walk because my legs are all wobbly, and my crew and my friends and everybody is like so supportive, and it's just lovely. um, I felt great. And I was like, and I went back to that moment like 2 months ago before that I was like, I was almost about to not try because of my fear of like not being able to. And look what I just did. And so, of course, now I'm starting to train for the English Channel in Catalina Island because why not, right? No, it's just amazing. So you just keep pushing yourself, seeing what you can do. And even if I hadn't made it, if I had stopped, I still would have had great stories and I would have learned something along the way. So I will continue to do it. Again, it's always for the cause of we're raising awareness for Alzheimer's. But from a personal perspective, I mean, I grew enormously through that process. Just, now I know I can swim around Manhattan. Don't necessarily recommend it. I did get some bacterial issues afterwards, but aside from the sicknesses, yeah, it was great. It was fabulous.
I, I mean, you've accomplished some crazy physical feats. Talk to somebody who has never done, I mean, they all sound way overwhelming to the average human being. Um, how did you get started? Like, what was the first thing that you said, all right, I'm gonna try this?
So it was 20 years ago. It was around probably a few months earlier than this. My father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I was always an athlete, so I played tennis and things like that, but never endurance stuff. I was like, that's for like I was one that made fun of the marathoners, like, oh, that's bad on your knees, your toenails, all that kind of stuff. And when my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, just sort of as a mental health coping mechanism, I just started to run a little bit, like just to get away and just like let things process. So for me, running became meditation.
Mm.
And I guess I needed a lot of it because I kept running further and further distances. And also, if you have sort of that A-type personality, you get to like 6 miles, you're like, I'm going to try for 10 miles, and then you go half marathon, etc. Um, but I ran my first marathon 20 years ago. It was Chicago, so 20 years ago in September, or I guess early October. Um, didn't know what I was doing. I had just sold a business and come back to the US and had a non-compete. So Hurricane Katrina had hit, and I went to the American Red Cross to donate some money and ended up getting on a plane and going down to New Orleans, where I slept on the floor of a church for 3 months. And would go out in the mornings before I was working with the Red Cross, before I would do like my volunteer work, and run around some track that still had like couches on it from the flood, right? And I was like, hurdle, hurdle, like, at least there were no alligators and stuff. But that's how I trained. I had no experience at all. And again, mindset was do the best you can. If I have to walk half of it, I'll walk half of it. Finished the first marathon, loved it. Was not like in horrible condition because I didn't push myself too hard. And then just started inching up. And I realized that when I train for things, again, it's the exploration. Endurance sports, for me, even a walk in the park, it doesn't have to be a 30-mile run, right? You can do like a 2-mile walk with your dog in the park. If you put the phone away, put the headphones away, just let your brain go. It's meditative.
Yeah.
And there's a rhythm in running, there's a rhythm in swimming that for me is just, it allows me to clear my head. I do my best thinking for work and clients when I'm doing that. My clients are like, Jill, go for a run. Jill, go take a swim.
Solve my
Um,
problem. Go for a run.
exactly. But also like just from a perspective of I'm sure, did you ever read the book, Michael Pollard, How to Change Your Mind?
No.
So Pollen or Poller, I've forgotten now. So it was a New York Times bestseller, and it's an interesting one. It's a lot to do with like psychedelics, but that's not the interesting part. The interesting part was that as we get older, he talks about like the brain chemistry, and that we get this predictive sense of it. So as we get older, to protect ourselves, every problem we use predictive analytics in our own brain to solve it based on our experience in the past. And that's what makes us seasoned and experienced.
Yep.
But if you don't start exercising your neurons a little bit differently, you're always going to, your solution is always going to be the same, regardless of what the problem is or what the best solution might be,
Mm,
right? And so after reading that book, I was like, you don't have to do all the things that Michael Pollan did. Like running does it for me. It allows me to sort of think about things differently, innovate, be creative. After I run, after I swim, I find myself drawn to arts and sort of the left side, right side brain and those sorts
interesting.
of things. So I found that it's made me much more creative in the business world as well. And whereas a lot of people come and say, we have to do it this way because this is the way everyone else is doing, I tend to look at things and say, well, we could do it that way, but wouldn't this be a more elegant solution for exactly what you need, right? Or wouldn't this be a more specific solution? And so all of it is sort of holistic. It works together. Like I can't separate my work from my exercise anymore. But I don't think any of us as human beings can totally do the severance thing, right? Where
Compartmentalize. Yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Well, let's dig in to the professional or the business side. Um, I I always enjoy talking with you, especially for our audience to like I said, illuminate what goes on behind the scenes of trying to get an infrastructure project funded, or what is infrastructure policy, or what is this administration's priorities? How is it affecting how the federal government looks at funding projects? What projects are important? How it affects local projects getting done? This entire I would call the public policy side of public policy and finance side of infrastructure investment. Many people see the big, bold, beautiful bill as a headline. How is that headline impacting positively or negatively what's going on in the world of infrastructure? And what are you seeing? Big question.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a big question and a good one. I think it's the $1 million question. I'm sure there are a million different perspectives on it as well. But overall, so infrastructure projects take a long time to develop, right? So first you get your priorities. What do I need? Do I need a road? Do I need a school? Do I need an airport, water system, et cetera? Then there's that planning process in terms of how we're going to pay for it, et cetera, the design process, et cetera. And so, on average projects, whether it's a transit center, system that takes, 40 years, or whether it's a water system that takes 10 years, right? They're not short-lived, and they tend to outlive any specific administration, right?
Yep.
The timelines are impacted greatly by legislation in terms of whether it's NEPA and environmental stuff, or whether it is the funding coming out of Washington. And obviously, the Big Beautiful Bill had a number of provisions in it that were catastrophic or threatening to certain sectors like clean energy. And if you're in the wind energy business, you know this is probably not the best moment in your life. And clean energy and those sorts of things have seen a reduction in terms of federal money coming from that and tax credits, et cetera. So there's uncertainty. It doesn't mean the project stops. It just means, is it going to be more expensive, or how are we going to refigure the monies? Likewise, transit systems. The infrastructure investment bill still has a significant amount of money left from the past administration's bills for transit, but that's been sort of stopped and paused, et cetera. But transit authorities are not saying, oh, then we won't do our project. They're saying, well, let's figure out a way to do it,
Right.
right? So there's a little bit more, historically, state and local governments have paid for the brunt of infrastructure anyway, with the federal government offering about 35% of the total cost. Right now, in certain sectors, we're seeing state and local governments a little concerned about where they're going to get their funding from, but they're still looking. So they might go from a 35% federal to a 0% federal, but they still need water, electricity, roads, and bridges, right? And so there's a lot more local government interest right now in what we call value capture, revenue generation. How can they do these sorts of things? But what is really sort of throwing a wrench into the system is uncertainty. And I think it's the tariff policy more than anything else that has been impacting projected costs. And so we have seen a number of projects sort of put their pencils down, and they're like, we have to figure out, is this a $1 billion project, or is this a $3 billion project
Right.
before we can kind of move forward with what we're doing? If you're already under construction, it is a little bit difficult if you're looking for steel right now and those sorts of things and the impacts that that's going to have. But very few projects are stopping altogether, right? They're just trying to figure this out. The challenge that we have is when there's uncertainty, things slow down. And slowing down has never been good for infrastructure, right? So every year that you delay an infrastructure project, sort of the rule of thumb is it's going to cost 12% more. And that's just in terms of construction inflation. We have workforce shortages right now, which are becoming increasingly acute as well. We've had just hyperinflation, not technically hyper, but very high inflation in the construction industry since before COVID. And COVID shot them up. They were starting to moderate, and now with the tariffs again, we're seeing really significant increases. That leads governments as well to start saying, you know, if we procure this, will our design builder or will our construction company actually be able to deliver it? And the design builders saying, we can't guarantee these prices because we haven't bought the products yet. And if there's a new tariff, then we don't know. So there is a lot of uncertainty. Again, it doesn't mean that people are stopping altogether. It just means that there is more hesitation, a lot more fighting over who's bearing which risks. So if you're the design builder, the construction company, you don't want to bear the tariff risk. The local government is like, I need a fixed price. I cannot continue
Right.
to adjust these sorts of things. So we're seeing a lot of that. On the positive side, though, anytime that there's reductions in terms of regulatory frameworks and regulation, NEPA, those sorts of things, which this administration is doing pretty effectively, cutting down on those sorts of things. That's going to streamline processes as well that are sort of in the early planning, and you can go from design to construction a little bit more quickly if you can get your permits. But the countervailing winds are the cost uncertainties. And I think that's going to continue. Where it gets really messy, BJ, is, there are two ways that you pay for infrastructure projects. And there's no miraculous third way. One is through taxpayer dollars. So whether you're financing schools or highways or whatever it means, everybody's contributing. So if you need more things, do your tax dollars, do your tax revenue needs to go up, or the opposite is that the user pay model, right? So toll
Yep.
roads and whatnot. And in the water sector, particularly, we have a lot of user pay because you have utility bills and those sorts of things. It's becoming acutely difficult for utilities to raise the price of water now because of affordability issues. And so they're really up against it in terms of they have needed investments that they need to do, but yet the rate base is unwilling or unable, in many
Mm.
cases unable, to bear the brunt of additional costs. And so these are some of the issues that everyone's dealing with right now. I mean, there are other issues, obviously, depending on the sector. So we work in transit and transportation. We work in water, whether it's wastewater, recycled water, flood management, sort of a wide array of things. Higher ed right now is also sort of up against it because with international students being sort of pushed out,
Yeah.
where's their revenue coming on some of the student housing deals and those sorts of things. So there's a lot going on right now that is leaving people scratching their heads. But governments can't wait, so they're continuing to look for things, scaling back sometimes a little bit on projects. And hopefully they're also doing a little bit of, let's call it strategic reprioritization, right? So things that they were looking at pre-COVID are still in their master plans, and the world has changed and that continues to
Right.
change. So I was making the joke to you before we started that, if it takes 20 years to plan an infrastructure project, by the time that 20 years comes, if you're putting in a road, but everyone has flying jetpacks, do you need that road anymore?
Yep.
And there's such hesitancy and inability to correct in real time these sort of master planning documents. And what we're seeing right now is a concerted effort to look at that and figure out what they can cut so they can spend more money on things that are more essential and more timely. So
I have so many questions. Um, let's go to the two ways to pay: federal government or taxpayer base or user base. And I think of that as I'm a real estate guy. I always simplify infrastructure to like building your house. You've got to go through, hey, what do we want in the house? How are we going to pay for this house? We got to start designing it, hire an architect, then we got to build it. And we make, I don't know, 300,000, 400,000, $500,000 investment in somebody's home. Uh, we're making 300 billion, 400 billion, 500 billion investments in public infrastructure. The capital markets or privatization, private funds started getting into infrastructure. And I've seen people talk about a 30-year mortgage going to a 40-year mortgage because, hey, we're going to live longer, people are living longer. That makes the affordability, it allows a household to afford that $500,000 house that used to be $300,000 because you're spreading the payments over 40 years. Are the capital markets getting into it? And is there any way that you're seeing the affordability of the project come down because a capital market or the capital markets are willing to take a longer view on the investment? And I think I was
no,
thinking specifically around here, the privatization of water. Um, I don't know where you're at if American Water is there, but American Water has taken over a lot of our system, and I don't know enough about how they're doing it, but they are. We have I would say a upper echelon user base, so I'm sure that they're able to pass that on to us. Um, Talk to me about how private money is getting into infrastructure.
yeah, I mean, so first, let me distinguish two things between funding and financing. So funding is really at the end of the day how things get paid
Get
back,
paid for.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's where it kind of comes in. Tax dollars can be federal, state, or local tax dollars. So it can be any of that, including
Yep.
grants and that kind of stuff. Or revenue would be user payments in the case of American Water. The financing thing is a completely different thing, and you're absolutely right. So the trick of the trade and what we all try to do is let's find the lowest cost of money so that our funding can be minimal, right?
Go
So
as far as possible.
yeah, so if we can get, a low interest rate, to use your mortgage example, if
Yep.
we can get, below market rate mortgages at 40 years, then we might do that, right? We might pay it off if we get a windfall, so we don't have to pay interest, et cetera. But we want that flexibility. And I think that what happens is that, so municipal government, we have a $7 trillion US municipal bond market, right? So tax exempt bonds are everywhere. Everybody is using them. You can go to the smallest irrigation district in like Eastern and Yakima Valley in Washington, and they have bonding authority, right? Everybody in America can bond, right? So we have a huge bond market and whatnot. Now, municipalities, utilities, they bond at pretty low rates. So, kind of a little bit above treasuries, but if they're tax exempt, then, it's a very good deal.
And can I just for listeners, bond to me is a public mortgage. Is
Yeah,
that
it's just
it,
it's a loan. It's
yeah,
just a loan.
right.
They're all loans,
Yeah.
bonds or mortgages, or a loan for your car, right? It's
Yep.
all, I'm getting a bunch of money up front from somebody out there, and then I'm going to pay it back over time. So, a lot of municipalities, they can borrow pretty regularly. They're AAA, AA, whatever it is. It's still a very good deal. Obviously, the federal government historically has been the lowest cost borrower. That's where we get treasury bonds and those sorts of things. And that's the lowest. So if you can get a federal loan, because they have things like TIFIA and WIFIA and some of
Yep.
these loan programs, those are 35-year loans at treasury market rates. That's really favorable. So people like those as well. Grants are also really great, all those things. When you bring in the private sector, now this is not necessarily American Water, which is a regulated utility as
Right.
well, right? But let's say a public-private partnership, and you bring in another group. They can place bonds. I mean, they can easily do a bond issuance for something they don't own, which would be like a school or a road or something like that. It's still owned by the public entity, and they can issue bonds for it, no problem. But they're paying. There's what we call the private sector premium. So usually it's about 175 basis points, so 1.75% higher in terms of interest than, say, if you were to be a municipality and doing it.
Got it.
Now, in some cases, a municipality needs to do it or wants to do it that way because if you're holding the loan, you also hold a little bit more of the risk. And so it should modify your behavior. But the question at the end of the day in these sorts of structures is that financial incentive, at-risk private equity, at-risk debt, and that sort of thing, is that enough to influence the behavior in a way that you're actually offsetting the risk, right? And this is where we've had problems in the past, right? Just writing a contract to say to the private sector, you're in charge of that risk, doesn't mean that's what happens. There can be lawsuits back and forth. Look at
Right.
the Purple Line in Maryland. There are all kinds of things that can happen. And so it's really about locking in the details on that. And we do this a lot. We work in public-private partnerships quite frequently. And, it's no matter what the paper says at the end of the day, the parties have to have an understanding about who's bearing what risks, right? But so, yes, private capital is there. And, we always say there's lots of powder. Just sitting there waiting to be invested. Certainly, people are going to want to invest in something that has a 30-year, almost annuity-like return, right?
Yep.
But the question is from the public sector perspective, again, is what value am I getting by paying kind of higher interest than if I were just to issue bonds myself? So in the US market, to be honest with you, we very rarely see 100% private
Right.
financing. We always see these blended things where the public sector will maximize whatever it can do, whether it's through federal grants, tax revenues, municipal bonds, and then whatever that differential is, then they might take that to the private sector and have them and do some sort of public-private partnership with private financing. So there's like a million flavors of that ice cream right now.
Yeah.
um, but it is an option. I mean, it definitely is an option. And what we do find is that when you do the P3, it does take a little of the hemming and hawing out of things, and things do tend to get done more quickly. Delivery is often almost always quicker than if you do it under a traditional design bid build and design build. So, as I said before, the cost of delays is really big. So
Yeah.
you also have to see that, like, what is the actual cost savings by doing this in 2 years instead of 5 years? And how does that translate versus the higher interest rate, right? Because you might be actually saving money by doing it this way, even though you have higher interest rates. We see a lot of that with the Corps of Engineers as well, right? So they have projects that take 50 years or more with federal funding on a pay-go basis. What if somebody could just come in and do it in 2 years and save $1 billion, even with the high interest rates? It's going to save money, right? So
Right.
it's something that needs to be considered more thoroughly by the federal government for sure.
The other thing you talked about, you said value capture and something else. I didn't grab it as ways to that municipalities or agencies are looking at. I had strategic reprioritization, value capture, and I thought there was maybe a third thing that you said.
Yeah, so value capture, just to be clear for your listeners,
Yeah,
in revenue generation are
and revenue
really
generation.
there are ways to extract value from existing assets. So it could be the concession of an existing road. It could be if you have excess real estate that you give it to a developer, and
Yep.
then you, as the city or town, like get part of the parking revenue or you get part of the revenue. So it's everything from selling T-shirts on the side of the road at a rest stop to like naming rights and air rights and those sorts of things. And
It's kind of the entrepreneurial spirit inside of public entities
absolutely. And I remember a story that Steve Goldsmith told me. He was the former mayor of Indianapolis and then deputy mayor of New York. And it was right at the beginning of sort of the internet stuff. And, we still had those phone booths in New York City, right? And so
Yep.
um, they had a great idea, and I've forgotten the name of the company, that they would have convert the phone booths because they didn't need phones. Everyone had cell phones now into charging and like free internet and wave. So it's really good until it wasn't, right? And I think they got like $1 billion. New York City did for the company to come in and do it. But then hackers started putting like pornography on all the
Uh,
corners. So it wasn't a sustainable model, but it was an interesting one at the time. But I think, cities and states definitely are looking right now for creative ways to add revenue without necessarily putting it on the back of the taxpayer, the ratepayer. So anything they can do to extract value from existing assets makes a lot of sense. And that could also include disposition of assets, right? If you are, the federal government's looking at it right now, the United States holds so much real estate.
right.
Do we need it all, or should we sell some of it now and, use it to pay down debt and those sorts of things? So these are the questions I think that state, local, and federal governments are looking at right now very seriously, just to address massive amounts of debt and infrastructure needs.
What do you see is the greatest priority across the nation from an infrastructure standpoint?
So it's not one sector, right? If you went to a conference at the federal level on infrastructure, transportation would suck all the energy, all the air out of the room, right? So they always get the money, they get the attention, et cetera. But if you go out west and you start talking about transportation, people are more interested in water, right? With the drought, with all sorts of issues that are happening there. In other areas, it's energy, right? So you go down to Texas right now, and some of the issues they've had with their grid and whatnot. So there's never going to be a universal consensus across the United States about which sector is the highest priority. Obviously, broadband has also been a very high priority for
Right.
a long time. I think if we had to like pull away all of the noise and everything else and said, what is the one issue facing infrastructure today that you would like to resolve? It would be getting projects done in a timelier and more cost-effective manner. I think there's universal consensus on this. Um, Nobody wants to shut out the public input and whatnot, but we can't have processes that take 25 years to get to consensus, right?
Yeah.
Because by doing that, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. We're increasing our costs. We're lessening the positive benefits that we can get from the. You do a cost benefit analysis up front. If you defer the project, the benefits on a present value decrease, but the costs keep going up, right? Because of inflation. So it's not a fair exchange there. So we have a lot of that going on right now, but I think that is the big issue. And I think there's solutions, and we have certain jurisdictions that are doing much better now in terms of procure. It's the boring stuff though, BJ. It's not like the sexy,
Yeah.
like I need money for this, let me finance it and go to dinners on Wall Street. It's like, how do you procure this stuff in a way that is fair and balanced and protects the taxpayer, right? How do you ensure that the contracts that are signed are enforceable and actually fair and balanced? That's where people have more of an issue. I think a
Yeah.
secondary in the issue in this as well is, as good as we are and as hopeful as we are as Americans, we tend to rely on models that worked in the past without necessarily thinking about the future. And if we build back we're replacing a lot of infrastructure, bridges, roads, and whatnot. If we build back as we've built in the past, we're totally unprepared for the future, right? We need smart infrastructure. We need to be using smart sensors. They have pavements now that are self-generating. Like, why aren't we procuring this? And the reason we're not procuring is because the first costs are high, although the life cycle costs are low. So we need to switch the mindset. We need to take a holistic approach to an infrastructure project and say what is best for us, what future proofs us against like changes. If we're in the future, we need to have sensors in them that tell us A, where the levees are. We don't know where 60% of the levees in America are, believe it or not. And B, if they're failing, right? Bridges now, it's pretty standard to put in those sensors, but we didn't have them before 1990, right? These are the things that we really need to start thinking about, is not only building more efficiently, but also building taking into account technology and the future needs that we're going to have.
How do you think in a time where innovation is moving so rapidly, and I would say our community in the AEC, the engineers, I was just at a general on-call consulting engineering interview yesterday. We are the advisors. Our industry is the advisors to the agencies, to the owners, trying to make these decisions. It always comes down to the almighty dollar of like, yeah, we want to do it better, and a little bit of the, well, we've always done it that way. In a On the public agency side, they are risk averse because they really have no incentive for not being risk averse. And the engineering community, I think in general, is risk averse because the mission is kind of mission critical. The safety of transport of people driving over bridges, as an example. So I think we're in a time where innovation is happening rapidly, but the adoption of innovation, which I think will be the potential cost saver. What's your message to the engineering community?
I think the engineering community needs to start partnering with the technology community up front, right? So there's an example that I often cite because it just was really interesting. It's going to take us on a segue for a minute, but I'll
That's
come back
good.
to this. So in like the 1990s, Canada needed a bunch of public hospitals. And they wanted to do public-private partnerships for these hospitals. And so you have design builders, and that was it, right? So they knew how to do public-private partnerships. But what Canada wanted were smart hospitals, right? So that any room could be used for surgical procedures, sleeping, cafeteria, right? So it would have the technology that every room was adaptable.
Hmm.
And the design builders were like, we can't do that. We don't know how to do that. And so what happened organically is that Siemens and some of the technology companies partnered with the design builders, and they took on the risk of the technology for 30 years, right? They would update it, refresh it, et cetera. And it was built as part of the integration of this project. And so the hospitals got the best. They got to shove the risk off, even renewal risk, to this third party. Siemens and these groups that were inventing these sorts of things got a chance to actually proof of concept and get it in there and show
R&D it,
what's
yeah.
going on. And the design builders could do what they did best, which was sort of structuring the deal and delivering the architecture around it. And I think that's what we need. We need a different approach. Now, it's hard to force technology to come in with engineers, right? But I do work sometimes with Purdue University, and Linda Liu and some groups out there have just come up with some amazing technologies, and they're doing pilots here and there, right? But I think engineering companies that work with some of the universities or some of these technology companies, um, there would be a way, I think, to structure it so that the risk could be shared by the developer of the technology as opposed to the town, right? And you could do it on a shorter, smaller basis, and then
Right.
until proof of concept, right? Everybody wants cutting edge, they don't want bleeding edge, right? And so it's just an issue of proof of concept. But I do think that in the infrastructure world, it's only a matter of time before some of the technology companies, including the AI groups, just start to come in as leads, as partners, as key elements in this. So you have the finance guys, you have the engineering guys, construction guys. I think now we're going to start seeing the technology guys. We're seeing it in some sectors. Water, for instance, where there's new sorts of movement towards purifying water and cleaning water and wastewater and whatnot. New groups I'd never heard of like 2 years ago are now on the scene, showing new technologies and those sorts of things. And it's fascinating, right? And you're to your point, a lot of the government agencies are like, wait, what is this? What is this? Sometimes they have to get on a plane and go see it in Dubai or wherever it might be.
Yeah.
But even, the United States, if we keep doing things the same way, we're going to be in the same position, but we'll be worse in 100 years than we are now, right? So it's an issue of coaching people through it, and I think it doesn't have to be scary, particularly if the technology firms start to come in, and they'll create subsidiaries that are ring fenced just for this sort of thing. But
Right.
I think the entire industry needs to be sort of put in a box, shaken up, and like completely like redistributed. I think it's time.
I I don't disagree. I'm always trying to think of how do we do it quickly and maybe how do we do it proactively because I think if you don't do it proactively, it's going to happen to you eventually. And I don't know how and when that does. Um, but I'm always curious on how we can be trying to be proactive as both an industry advising owners or agencies and then those agencies that are they're doing their best to steward the taxpayer dollars in many cases or the toll roads or the fees from their users. Anything we didn't cover that you think is relevant and current right now?
Maybe the only other, what I just find interesting,
Yeah.
fascinating, is, one of the other sort of challenges right now that we're seeing in infrastructure is generally multi-jurisdictional, right? So if you're looking at roads crossing
Yep.
states and local government, I mean, there's some things like schools which are very local, et cetera, but what I find really interesting right now is particularly in the water sector out west, California, et cetera. There's a significant interest in recycled water, right? So essentially all water that exists on the planet existed thousands of years. It's all been recycled a million times. So recycled water is essentially taking wastewater that's been cleaned and accelerating the natural filtration process, right, to make it drinkable. And there are examples all over the world where people do this. We're still not there with regulations yet exactly. We're very close, but maybe it's less regulation than it is public acceptance, right? Somebody came up with the term toilet to tap, and that like set us back a decade, right? Everyone's like, no, bad marketing right there, bad PR. But I think it is a reality that's going to hit us. But what I found really fascinating about this, the technology is there. It's not that hard. It's less expensive and less energy intensive than say desal. Um, but it requires jurisdictions to negotiate, right? So you might have a wastewater treatment plant in one jurisdiction and a water district in another that wants to buy that water and then recycle it and use it for
Hmm.
drinking water. Um, I have never seen such gamemanship, it's like it is Machiavellian what's going on out there, right? Like, I don't want to give you my water. Like, it could be worth billions of dollars in like 3 years. So you need to pay me this, that, and the other. And I think that in some sense, organizationally, like
Yeah.
we're just not ready for some of these technologies, right? Like we have to have like a different governance structure around some of this because I mean, I get where everyone's coming from. If you don't have enough money and they do and you want more money, then I'm going to hold off and but it's the public that's suffering, right? It's
Right.
the
Yeah.
public
Yeah.
can't get the water. So how are we going to address some of these issues from sort of a broader governance basis is also really important, right? And water, particularly watersheds, are not jurisdictionally bound, right? So even if you're looking at climate resilience, right, and raising water levels, how do you get that poor community over there to be participating with this rich community over here? Because the rich community is putting levees that's sending all the water to the poor
To the poor
community, right?
community.
So in my view, like our entire government structure right now, or governance structure, is antiquated. And like it needs really somebody needs the forethought to just come forth and say, let's rethink some of these things, particularly when it comes to infrastructure. Otherwise, I just don't see. I mean, I think we're going to constantly be in our little silos.
Hmm.
And our siloed approach is what has created a lot of the problems that we're living with today. So, just something else for people to work on after they listen to your podcast.
Yeah, I got a list now. All right, before I let you go, what song was in your head while you were swimming?
So I had two songs. One is there's a artist, I don't know, he's named Jesse Wells. Have you heard of him? He's very
Uh,
popular right now.
okay.
Um, he's from like Arkansas. He's an acoustic, kind of a Bob Dylan-y kind of guy, and he has this song called Horses, that for some reason was playing in my head, but it got almost nauseating after a while. And then there's another song. It's older. It's called Audacious. I don't know
Okay.
if you know Franz Ferdinand is his name. I think that's his name. Yeah,
I
Franz
don't.
Ferdinand, Audacious. Go look it up. That's a fun song. And as I was like throwing up in the in the Hudson from seasickness, right? I also drank half of the Hudson, so it was like seasickness or like I don't know, but
Poison.
I was poisoned. So I'm like on my back, like one stroking it, trying to drink some water, and like just I was like, Jill, my in my head, I said, just be audacious, just do this. You feel audacious. And that song came in, and for the last 3 hours, it was just me and Franz Ferdinand and Audacious. And when I finished, I was like, this is awesome. I was really expecting, so I went in thinking, think singer-songwriter as opposed to like power ballads. And singer-songwriter, I did really well with Jesse Wells and Horses for about the first 6 or 7 hours. But like the last 3 or 4 hours, I was like, nah, it's audacious. And it still sticks with me. If I hear that song, like my
Takes you
energy
back,
levels
takes you
go
right
up.
back.
Exactly.
That's great.
So
How
if
about,
nothing else, people have music tips now.
yeah, how about on your reading list? Anything new?
So I just reread, and I have you ever read The Finite and Infinite Game by James Kearse?
I I think I read The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. I have not read The Finite and Infinite.
I highly recommend. I read it once a year,
Okay.
and it. I just read it over Labor Day, so it's kind of fresh in my head. But I, particularly again with younger employees and those sorts of people, like there's a lot of the finite game as defined by Kirsten. It's first read, you're like, what is this? Second read, you're like, whoa. Third read, you're like, this guy is so profound. um, so it's the finite game is where there's a winner and a loser, and they're
Yep.
defined. And the infinite game is where you keep playing so that the game can continue, right? And I think that's sort of what I
Very
try to,
applicable to
yeah,
infrastructure right now.
it is, and it's also applicable, I think, in society in general, right? It's not always about me versus you, zero-sum game. I'm the winner, you're the loser. It's also about community, building up other people around you, right? And so read that every year because it gives me a compass point again in
Yeah.
terms of doing what I think is right and what is better for society than trying to win the this battle or that battle. So that was a good one that I just finished. And then I also read a really weird one. Well, weird from a sort of this discussion. It's called Chasing the Scream. Did you ever read that?
Nope.
So it has nothing to do with infrastructure or swimming or anything like that. It's the history of the war on drugs. It was so well written. I read it like it was a novel, but it was
Huh.
fascinating. And it definitely, if you want to read something completely different, somebody in a business meeting mentioned it. And so I immediately, like during the meeting, went online and bought it. And so it was at my room when I got back. I could not put it down, but definitely recommend it. Completely different perspective, right? And they talk about, what they did in Portugal to deal with drug addiction, the US example, Canada. So it's really just an interesting area,
Yeah.
and something to think about when you're swimming 30 miles. I have a lot of time to think about things, so I just keep reading different things.
That's great. Jill, it's always great to catch up with you. Congrats on
Likewise.
all of your success. Where can people find out about donating to your efforts around Alzheimer's?
So yeah, on my social media, and I can shoot you that, but I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all of those things. Yeah, we're constantly doing fundraisers for Alzheimer's. I'm getting ready in 2 weeks to swim the Chicago River Swim. I don't know if you know that one.
I don't.
First time in 100 years they're having it. So
Wow.
somehow I got in with 500 swimmers. It's a short swim. It's just 2 miles, but I figure I'm gonna get all the dirty rivers out of the way, uh, and then. But we're raising money for ALS on that one.
Awesome.
It's an important cause. But yeah, I will. I'll shoot you the links. And yeah, if people like to follow crazy people doing crazy things, then I've got some
Uh,
good stories on my
You're the gal.
feeds.
I I attest to that. You continue to inspire us and educate us. So Jill, thank you so much for your time. Great
No,
seeing
thank
you.
you, and thank you, BJ, and to everyone over there for your support as well. I felt it while I was swimming. I really did.
I'm glad. Everybody, if you're enjoying the show, please like, subscribe, or send it to somebody that you think might get value, especially those that are influencing, advising, and making decisions around infrastructure investment. Until next time, have a great week and a great weekend.